and she came and picked me up, and then I was kind of like an ungroundable child. Like, I was kind of like, I knew they worked, and I would come home and be alone anyways. So it was like they couldn't really ground me.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah. And then with my bat mitzvah money, I bought myself like one of those old Mac computers with like the color on the back of the monitor. They were cool. I don't know. I think it was orange, the one I bought. And I put that in my room upstairs, and that's when I like discovered like porn online.
Yeah.
So I got like really into that, and lost my virginity at like 14, which I guess is like kind of normal, but it's also kind of young. I don't know. But it wasn't like with a boyfriend or something. It was the one that I loved. You know, it was just like,
yeah,
like I'm ready to do what I see them do on the computer.
Yeah.
You know.
You were curious about it.
Yeah.
You wanted to just try it.
Yeah. So I smoked a lot of weed, like, I guess, throughout middle school, and then when I got to high school, is when I started, you know, like started drinking at parties and stuff like that. And the neighborhood, like I said, was kind of like an upper middle class, wealthier neighborhood. And so like some of the kids, I went to school with like some of the like Bush kids, Anheuser-Busch kids who are like really wealthy, and they just like,
Ooh.
there was just like a lot of cocaine.
Okay.
Yeah, so I mean at a young age we started like partying pretty hard.
Yeah.
And then I think it was like my sophomore year of high school, I had like my first real boyfriend. And I remember thinking he was really cool because he like smoked a lot of weed and like did drugs, and I thought that was cool, and like
Totally.
I tried a bunch of drugs that I wanted to try. And that's kind of when I started like trying like mushrooms and acid, and then I remember trying Oxycontin, and then it was kind of like all downhill from there. That was some good shit, and I was like doing it like before school, after school. I'd like sneak out on school nights to like go to my friend's house or my boyfriend's house, and like I didn't really realize how serious it was at the time. Like I don't think I was like super addicted, but I do remember my boyfriend like sleeping at his house and him not being able to get out of bed, and I didn't understand, and he kept saying he was sick, and I didn't really get it.
Yeah.
I don't think I had gotten to that point yet.
Right. Were a lot of people doing Oxycontin back then?
I know a lot of my friends were.
Yeah.
I think, like I said, I think some of the kids who were, you know, came from like old money or like new money, who kind of was able to like get those kind of things, or
yeah.
I don't remember like people telling me they were stealing it from their parents or anything like that.
Okay.
I think people just had the means to buy it.
Yeah.
And it was something that was like, I don't know, awesome to me. You know, I didn't tell like people I was friends with that like weren't in that group of friends who was snorting Oxycontin. Like I knew I, you know, wouldn't want to tell like some of my girlfriends that.
Yeah.
So I kind of kept it a secret. And then after my senior year of high school, I decided to go to Israel for a year. And that was like the 1 year I had of, like a whole year I had of sobriety. Like not drinking, not doing drugs, anything. And it was like a really spiritual experience. I just remember feeling like really close to my higher power when I was there that year. But by the end of the year, I was like ready to come home. And I came home for the summer and like just kind of went wild again and partied and did a bunch of coke and then I went to school in New York.
Okay.
Yeah, I went to college in New York and I didn't like it. School was hard for me. I just sort of felt like I was in a bubble. New York City was kind of overwhelming to me, I think, especially being in college. I always had some like ADD, so I think like the focus, it was hard for me to focus. So I called my parents and they told me I could come home, but I had to like take classes at home. So I came home, met up with some old friends and started dating someone and decided I was going to move to Denver, Colorado. How I was able to do that was because I told my parents like I was going to school up there, and I had applied and gotten into Metro State University in Denver, and I moved there with a boyfriend, and we were both going to go to school out there, and his mom was going to pay for like an apartment and all this stuff. And then when we got there, she kind of just like dropped us off and was like, fend for yourselves. So we ended up, neither of us went to school. And I was like really in love with that guy.
How old were you around this time?
I was about 21, 22, maybe.
Okay.
I guess when I had moved back home from New York, I was working at restaurants and like, you know, was out late drinking every night and partying. Did a lot of partying.
Yeah.
It was fun though. Like I worked with all my best friends and stuff. But yeah, no, back to Denver. Yeah, so moved out there with the idea that we were going back to school and then ended up needing, like having to work full time to like pay for rent and pay for ourselves, our lives out there. And yeah, I was really in love with my boyfriend at the time. And we both got jobs and started working and I don't know, that relationship like just kind of went south. He ended up like cheating on me and leaving me, and I remember like being devastated. And he left me with his dog. Like he like literally moved out and moved in with some other girl and left the dog and like wouldn't answer my calls, and the dog was like really anxious all the time because like where, you know, he wasn't around. And then one day he like, and so like I was taking the dog to the vet. I don't know, it was just like a lot of responsibility, and I felt like abandoned, and I felt like the dog was abandoned. So one day he came and like picked the dog up, and I like didn't hear from him again. And I had like, you know, made a new group of friends in Denver, so I ended up like also kind of wilding out.
Totally.
And yeah, partied, like slept with all of my friends. It didn't like ruin our friendships, but just kind of was like, I don't know, well, doing whatever I felt like I needed to do to make myself feel better at the time. But I, you know, I was doing a lot of drinking, a lot of coke still, Xanax, like anything, you know.
Yeah.
Robitussin. We'd like robo-trip some nights.
Robo-trip.
Yeah.
Yeah. I never got into Robo-trip, but I've heard a lot of people talk about doing it, you know?
It was like fun one time, and then like
Yeah.
another time, like we just like got sick.
Totally, yeah. I can see that.
It was just like stupid stuff. Like one of my,
Yeah.
so when Justin moved out, I had like 2 more boys move into the house. So it was like me and like 3 other boys, and I don't know. We just, yeah. Like my friend Zali would come home and like pull Robitussin out of his sock and be like, "We're robo-tripping tonight." But yeah, I felt like things were starting to get a little out of hand. Like I wasn't doing well at work. I had gotten a job at a trade show company in Denver. It was cool. We set up like corporate meetings and special events at like the Broncos Stadium or the convention center, things like that. It was cool. I liked the job, but when I started like partying really hard, I just kind of stopped like putting effort in at work. And I think I had called my parents and told them that like I was kind of having a hard time, and they were like, "Oh yeah, come home, come home." So I was like, "All right."
So they didn't totally know about everything that was going on, or about like the using.
No. I had also wrecked my car like right before I was about to move home. It was my 23rd birthday, and we were drinking. And it's in January, so there's like a light snow on the ground. And where my apartment complex was, it was like up the hill from the Broncos stadium.
Okay.
And someone said they wanted McDonald's, and I was like, ooh, I'll go get it. You know, I'll drive. Like, that was a great idea. Um, we went and picked up McDonald's, and then I was like, we need to go do donuts. We need to go do donuts in the parking lot of the stadium.
Yes.
Like, there's a perfect light snow on the ground, so we go down there. It's like me, my friend Zolly, and my friend Lee, and driving around, ripping the e-brake. And I was like, one more time, like, this is gonna be the biggest one. And I ripped the e-brake around one of the light poles, and we're like sliding, and I'm like, oh shit, like we weren't stopping, and we ended up hitting the curb so hard. And we were just laughing, like I think the milkshakes and fries and shit were all over the car. And then I put the car in drive, and I'm like trying to go, and I'm like, it's not going. And we're all like looking at each other like, what's going on? So my friend Zolly gets out of the car, and he's like staring at it, and he's like, okay, go. And I like try to go, I'm like, it's not going. And then he's like, wait, stop. And I'm like, what? So I jump out of the car. I had popped both of my tires, like,
Ooh.
completely like off their axles. They were just like laying on the side. So that was, yeah, I was just like, I don't know, partying. But yeah, I knew I had to go home, and my parents were like coming to get me with like a U-Haul, and I was like, well, I gotta like drive myself back a couple days later. They're like, why? I'm like, well, my car's in the shop. Why is your car in the shop? You know, kind of made up a lie and whatever. Anyways, I ended up coming home from Denver, moved into my parents' house, and like literally like 2 weeks after being there, a tornado came through and like just totally like just ripped the roof off, and like all the windows blew in, and our cars were smashed. And it was like we lived in like University City. It wasn't like we lived in a rural area. It was like a really weird thing that happened. Like the news came, and then that happened, and my parents like ended up getting a divorce like in the middle of all that too. And that was like a really stressful time for me. Like they were fighting really bad, and my mom was fighting with me and my dad, and she had kind of like moved out of the apartment we were staying in because of the tornado, and went to live with her parents, and so it was like me and my dad in the house. And I ended up having some friends from Denver coming back in town because they were selling weed. And I like hooked them up with like a bunch of my friends and people that would buy weed from them. And I ended up meeting a new friend who was like driving the weed for my friend Kevin, and then Kevin would fly in and meet him there and like sell it. Yeah, so my new friend, I ended up like hooking up with him a bunch, and he was like into pain pills.
Yeah.
And like I'd kind of like forgotten about all that, you know?
Right. So you weren't really doing Oxycontin. You'd fucked around with it a little bit, but then like throughout like New York and Denver, it wasn't really a part of your life. You were just kind of having fun still, partying.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But like back then I didn't realize that my partying was like excessive.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Totally.
Like now looking back on it, like yeah, all I did was party.
Yeah.
Like, and that wasn't okay, and I didn't get anywhere doing that, you know?
And then it started to progress.
Yeah, so we started doing pain pills, and like really quickly that turned into heroin.
Yeah.
And sort of like from then on out, like my addiction just kind of got out of hand. I don't know, that the guy, I ended up living with the guy who was into pain pills because he had gotten busted and had to be on house arrest in Missouri, and he didn't know anyone but me in Missouri. So I ended up having this guy who I was just hooking up with, like wasn't really that into, ended up having him on house arrest in my apartment for like 5 months or so, which really turned into a relationship because we were just like living in such close quarters, and he was home all the time, and it just turned into that, which was really unhealthy, you know.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think we had already started, like, I guess we were still doing pain pills at that point, and he had gone to prison for 5 months.
Okay.
And I'd moved back in. I moved out of my apartment, moved back in with my mom, and then 5 months later, when he was getting out of prison, I rented another apartment, and when he got out, came back to live with me again. And that's when, like, pain pills turned into heroin.
Yeah. I think that's a big progression for like a lot of people, especially like the people that were born in like the early 90s, like the people born in the early 90s that are heroin addicts. I feel like that's a very common theme in their story, to have been taking pain pills and then end up on heroin.
Yeah.
You hear that over and over again, you know?
I mean, yeah, I think that pain pills were just like so accessible when we were younger.
Yeah.
And like kind of stayed that way, you know? Like you can find them in anybody's medicine cabinet, like in their bathroom kind of thing.
Is that kind of how it was? Like a lot of people's parents, like a lot of people just had them.
I think, yeah, and I think that people's parents who had them, I think they knew, like, okay, like one of these when my back really hurts, you know?
Yeah.
Not like I'm going to keep popping these to get high.
I'm going to take 5 of them.
Yeah, no, it was like, so then there would always be these bottles sitting there. Oh, from like 2 years ago. You know, like they don't need these anymore. At least that's how it became for me. Like I started stealing pills from like my grandpa or my friend Chloe. Which was horrible, you know? And then, yeah, it progressed to heroin because I had a friend who was like, try this. It's like way cheaper and way stronger.
Right.
You know?
Yeah.
And I, you know, already being addicted to the pain pills at that point, it's like, hell yeah, you know? But it's kind of fucked up because, like, I knew, you know, I feel like most people know that, like, you know, heroin's not, like, the fun drug to do. Like, everyone knows, like, oh, you know,
totally, people
get really addicted to heroin.
Yeah, everyone knows, like, nothing good comes from heroin.
Yeah.
Deep down in their heart, like, everybody knows that.
Yeah. But I guess, like, being that I was, like, such a big party, and I thought, like, I just could, like, do drugs and put them down and just, like, do them recreationally, I guess. So that was, like, my thinking going into heroin. Like, I'm not addicted to any other drugs, so, like, I can, you know, do this occasionally, too.
Totally.
But for me, unlike all the other drugs, like, I know I drank and I did coke, but, like, I was able to put it down. Like, I didn't go and buy myself cocaine or drink by myself or, you know, but heroin was that drug.
Right.
You know. And, like, knowing that it's, like, bad and wrong or taboo or whatever, like, I stopped kind of, like, using with friends, and it turned into, like, just a big secret addiction.
Yeah. It started getting dark.
It started getting dark, yeah.
Yeah.
Like, you know, if you're hiding something, then you're lying. And I was lying to everybody I loved, you know.
Yeah.
Thinking, like, what they don't know won't hurt them, and, like, I still felt in control. until it got to the point where, like, I couldn't pay my bills. And I couldn't, you know, I had to move back in with my mom again. I think I, like, you know, made excuses, like, as to why I didn't have money because everything was too expensive, or I don't know, you know, but I was able to hide it really well.
Yeah.
And
they didn't know you were using heroin, like, when you moved back in with them?
Right.
Okay.
Like, never. In 2017, I had, like, I like, just was completely out of control. Like, I lost all control. I had a job as a manager at a restaurant, and I was working a lot of shifts. And, like, to keep up with that, I was doing a lot of drugs, so I wasn't sick. It got to the point where, like, if I didn't have, you know, heroin in my system, I was sick, and I couldn't work and, like, keep up and do everything I needed to do when I was sick. And then all that money I was making, which was a lot of money, I didn't have any. All of it went to drugs, and I had just, like, completely, like, lost it, and I, like, had to come clean to my parents and everyone, which was a big shock. And for some reason, then, it was not received well. My boss, I had, in the past, like, babysat for his kids and stuff, and he just, when I told him, like, I had a problem, and, you know, he kind of was just like, fuck you, like, I let you be near my kids, like, you put my kids in danger, and all this stuff, and it really hurt, because it's like, I didn't put his kids in danger. It had nothing to do with his kids, or the times that I babysat, you know, a long time ago. And I had friends that, you know, didn't understand and stopped being friends with me. And I went to treatment. I did 30 days in 2017, and I thought, okay, this is just like a physical dependency. Like, I just need to detox off this drug. Like, it's keeping me captive, like, physically. And I never want to touch it again. And, like, literally the day I got out of rehab, I, like, really quickly realized that was not the case. Like,
totally.
It's totally mental.
Yeah.
Almost more so.
I agree.
Even.
I agree. I mean, they talk about it in 12-step program that it's very much so in the mind, a disease of the mind. And that, because I mean, and which would make sense to me, because, like, there's so many times, like, I got free from the physical part, but then I would always go back.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. Like, I don't think I ever handled stress well. Stress has always been a really big trigger for me.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Me too.
You know, and I think, you know, being in rehab, especially for the first time, it was like everything, I got a break. It was almost like a vacation for me, because I was, like, working so hard, and I don't know, so it was like when I got out, you know, your bills are behind. Like, I needed to make car payments. I think I had one of my cars repoed, you know, and I just wasn't prepared for life coming out, you know. I wasn't prepared enough mentally.
Coming out of detox.
Coming out of treatment, yeah.
Treatment.
Even after 30 days. Like, I don't think we were, like, really taught what to expect when we walked out of the door there. At the treatment center I went to in St. Louis. Yeah, so I, like, relapsed, I think, like, within a couple days of leaving. And then, honestly, like, I'd just been in one giant big relapse from, like, 2017 up until, you know, 2 months ago. I don't know, I still was, like, functional. I think everyone thought I was in recovery, and I wasn't. You know, I had kind of tricked everyone the whole time. Like, I got sober and I never went back. So that was, like, a long span, you know, for 4 or 5 years of, you know, heroin every day.
Yeah, that's a
and
long
then
time.
hiding it and not having anyone know.
Yeah.
I've been really good at like letting other people take care of me without asking them to.
Yeah.
And I guess I'm just manipulative.
That's what I was gonna say. Is like,
Yeah.
do you think it's I mean, we all manipulate, though. You know what I mean?
Yeah, just super manipulative. Yeah, for sure. But
And so now you're sober.
yeah, now I'm sober. Came to treatment, Oxford Treatment Center, at a Mississippi, and I had like gotten high the day I had pulled up to detox. And I was in detox for 4 days, but I wasn't detoxing. I like still had drugs in my system and like felt pretty good.
Did you drive?
My dad drove me.
Okay, so that's how you had dope. Because I was gonna say, like, I wouldn't bring dope on a plane.
We drove from St. Louis, and I had it in my cigarette pack. When we'd stop at the gas stations, I'd like snort it in the bathroom. I still had some left over. I remember throwing the rest of it out. Like, I just threw it in the trash can. I'm like, all right, that was it, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah, and they wanted to start me on, like, Suboxone and detox, and I had experiences where I had taken it too soon, and it sent me into precipitated withdrawals. So, like, that's why, like, I knew I wasn't sick in detox, so I knew that if I was given Suboxone, it would throw me into precipitated withdrawals. And after I moved out of detox into the residential part is when I decided to take a Suboxone, and it threw me into precipitated withdrawals.
Ooh.
Yeah, so I was, like, really sick, like, the first 2 weeks.
Can you talk a little bit about that, like, the difference between regular withdrawals from, like, an opiate or heroin, and then the withdrawals from, like, going into precipitated withdrawal?
Yeah, so normally for me, I would be able to go like 3 or 4 days in between like using.
Yeah.
If I was able to keep my anxiety at bay, like knowing, okay, like if I just hold out this long, you know, I was just able to keep my anxiety at bay, so it would take a while to get like kind of maybe like hot and cold or like upset stomach or something like that, but it would come on like really slow. But in precipitated withdrawals, basically the Suboxone kicks, it's like a synthetic opioid, and it kicks the opioids out of your receptors, like all at once. So having all of that, instead of slowly them like, you know, coming out of your receptors, it's like all at once, so you're thrown into like full-blown withdrawals, like diarrhea, throwing up, like body aches, sweats, cold, hot, chills, like not able to sleep, you know, all at once. Like it just comes on suddenly. So it's like the flu, you like might get sick over, you know, a period of, you know, a couple of days, and it gets worse. And this is like all of a sudden, all at once. So it's pretty horrible, and I really wasn't able to do anything but like lay on the shower floor, like under hot water. It was like the only thing that made me feel better.
Yeah.
And I still had really bad cravings the first, like every day for the first like 2.5 weeks in residential treatment. And I guess after like 2.5, 3 weeks, like one day I just woke up and the cravings were gone.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I still had a little bit of like post-acute withdrawals, like stomach aches or whatever, but nothing compared to, you know, full-blown withdrawals. Yeah, so
and how are you feeling now? I mean, you know what I mean? How are you feeling now?
Now I feel really good. I don't have like any opioids or synthetic opioids in my system. And I made it through 30 days in residential. which was hard because we were like we were in groups in therapy from 6:30 a.m. to get up at 6:30 and like be done around 4:35. So it was a lot, you know.
Yeah. Every day too.
Every day, even on the weekends. And then when I moved over to PHP, partial hospitalization, which is still in Mississippi, in Oxford, there was like a lot more free time, which was good for me. Like I'm okay with being bored. I don't know. I just sort of like felt a change. Like was like, unlike the last couple times, like I really am done. Like I realized like I had to change my people, places, and things, and that going home, you know, was not really going to be an option for me. Like I just knew that if I were to go home, my chances of relapse and like using are just like 10 times higher. Definitely. So I decided to move across country to Boise, Idaho.
Nice.
Yeah, it's a cool city. My best friend lives there, and she's been sober for a while, and I kind of just get to start fresh.
That's awesome.
Yeah, and I'm excited. Like, I'm looking forward to recovery there, and meeting people in the community, and like doing things outside, and living my life in a better way.
Absolutely, and I think you're going to go really far. The whole time I've been here, you've been a really solid person to be around. You know, I don't ever see you cause drama or any bullshit or, you know. So I just really respect your recovery.
Thanks.
You know.
Yeah.
But
I feel like, you know, like maturity has a little bit to do with it. I think that, you know, just like having so much life experience and I don't know, just being a little bit older, you know, I'm just ready to move on. Like I've partied enough for a lifetime. You know what I mean? Like I'm ready to move on with my life. I know what I want and what I don't want. And yeah, I'm ready to get on with it. Really, you know, I kind of stayed in this like negative, like cycle for so long. Like nothing in my life was changing. And I was frustrated with myself, you know. And I like didn't know how to get out of that like cycle or that rut. But definitely this place has helped me a lot. And yeah.
That's awesome. Well, thank you, Nina.
Thanks, Dill.